Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're well, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. It's Thursday, baby. Thursday. You're looking absolutely amazing. Don't know how you do it, but you do. You're awesome. And I'm going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as this is video one of just one video today. That's it. Just going to do one. Just one, because I'm actually away. So this isn't actually me. This is like a hologram. But let's get into the meat and potatoes, because what we're talking about in this video is deals. Deals. Because deals is the only thing that makes sense in the Idaho 4 case. People doing deals. But why did some people do deals? Now, first of all, I need to share this with you. You're not really going to be able to read it, but it gets on the screen so I can see it. But this is from my man Eddie. And he said, pay very close attention to what I'm going to point out. We know the cops were patrolling the area of King and Queen roads and immediately surrounding areas for 6 hours, which is said to have ended at 4 a.m. This is when they had their shift change. He says, I have reservations. It was well after 4. As I've said, I identified the suspect car as the same car entering the area repeatedly. I freeze-framed the video at every point as it entered Queen Road, including the 3-point turn. Part of my determination to ID it was the same car was to freeze the video to display reflections of the car's body at all travel points until it was past the camera leading to the house. Here's my problem, or here's the problem. We are led to believe there is no footage of the cops in any portion of the video, yet stating they made many routes through the King and Queen Road areas for the past, or for the 6 hours time span. The individual who left the door seen in the video is 1119 King Road. It appears as an ordinary house viewed from the front, but from the back view, it is actually an apartment complex. Between 3:30 and 4 a.m., there are numerous flashes of lights off the windows of this complex. The lack of distinction between the suspect vehicle and the cop's car there is none. There is a reason we hear Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, nor anyone else, have a knowledge of the incident initially at around 9 a.m. that morning, didn't call 911. There is a reason Dylan Mortensen stated she didn't know if anything was real, knowing who she heard say he's going to help and ID the man as a fireman or a cop, who faced her, then walked out. This aligns with Dylan Mortensen stating maybe he was there to protect her. The manipulation of Dylan Mortensen then is self-explanatory. She didn't know if anything was real or not in their effort to hide the presence of the fireman. Further, this explains the complete lack of logic when we are led to believe Dylan Mortensen or Bethany Funk or anyone having knowledge of the incident from 9 to 11:50 a.m. called 911 either. If something doesn't make sense, it isn't true, unless we understand the fireman was present at around 4:15 a.m. It cannot meet logic. Someone called the fireman or cop to the house. I'm willing to bet college officials, Greek council knows who was called to the house and when they were ordered to leave. And what we're talking about here is the story. When you think about it, right, Dylan Mortensen, she's copped a fucking load of flack, because we, for the last 2.5 years, have been fed stories. We've been fed stories, and these stories have been changed. They've been manipulated. Little bits have been released to try and make sense of other bits. Got fur on me. And ultimately, we now have earlier documentation that would show that Dylan Mortensen has told a story, told a version of events, that she saw stuff, she heard stuff. But you're left with this question, right? If you saw what you saw and you heard what you heard, why wouldn't anybody call for help? And then you think to yourself, Maybe someone did call for help. Maybe someone who was contacted externally then called for help, and help did actually go to that property. Maybe the timeline has been shifted to fit in with a certain narrative and a certain activity outside the property. But ultimately, what you've got inside the house is a story that some people entered this house and this crime took place. And then you've got another story alongside it, which is about covering up what happened, hiding what happened, and manipulating those people who can be manipulated. Now, Dylan Mortensen would turn around and basically say, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I don't know what's real. I don't know what I saw, what I heard. And that, to me, is the behavior of someone who is placed in a position where you would feel that they should know stuff. They're claiming that they heard stuff, that they did see stuff, but they didn't react in a manner that you would expect them to react. And you are then left with the question, why? And the only thing that makes sense is an external manipulation of that individual. They can't remove her from the situation because she's there, but they can control what she says. They can control the validity of what she says. So I do wonder whether what we're in fact seeing is Dylan Mortensen being, or her version of events being heavily manipulated and doctored, where you get like little sprinkles of truth within it when you rarely listen, but the overall story just doesn't make sense. And that's the point. The point is to defy all logic, because you then are just left with, well, what really happened? We don't know what happened. She don't know what happened. She didn't really react. And then the public does what they always do. And that is that you'll get some people who question the narrative and they'll think, well, something don't fucking sit right. But in the general scheme of things, the vast majority of people will put a bubble around these individuals, call them victims, and protect them. And therefore, there's no questions there. There's no nothing. But what would have happened if this would have gone to trial? And that is where you then have Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger, who unfortunately is in or not in a financial situation to obtain, I would say, adequate counsel. And who's he left with? He's left with Ann Taylor. Ann Taylor, who just happens to be born and bred Idahoan, a University of Idaho girl, a sorority girl, who is seen publicly around Bryan Kohberger acting like she truly is his savior. I've said this multiple times. The little touches on the arm here and there, and I believe Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime, carrying him all the way through. And then we get to this situation right at the end where all of a sudden we're led to believe that Bryan Kohberger approaches the prosecution for a deal. And that doesn't sit right with me. And I feel that Bryan Kohberger was placed in a position by someone whose sole job it was at the end was to make sure that this didn't go to trial. And it teed up several key things, with Ann Taylor stating within the courtroom itself that she wasn't ready to go to trial, to consistently make it look like things were not being shown, things were not being shared. So she didn't have everything that she needed to have, while the judge was pushed as if he was someone who was consistently on the prosecution side. I feel like we have all been manipulated to watch that this was playing out in a certain way, when in reality this was predetermined. This was a predetermined situation that they knew this couldn't ever reach the courtroom. So you have the witnesses, or the surviving roommates, whatever you want to call them, young adults, who have been manipulated. Their story has been manipulated. They have been manipulated. They have been made to look publicly like they cannot be trusted, that what they do say doesn't really make a great deal of sense. So you can't pinpoint any element of it and say, right, so let's focus on that and delve into what actually happened there. The entire story is just a jumbled mess that you're not going to get any sense from. And then you have Bryan Kohberger, the supposed perpetrator of this crime, who seems to have been manipulated into a plea deal that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Even if he was guilty of this crime, which, don't get me wrong, he could be guilty of this crime, but why would he still take this deal? If he is someone who lives in an area that has no death penalty and he decides to travel to an area that does have the death penalty, and then he does this crime and he is seemingly placed in a position where his counsel has openly stated in court that they're ineffective, he seemingly got some degree of fucking intelligence. Why would he have not just gone to trial to get everything out in the open then? We can sit here and we can turn around and say, no, this was a strategic move. This was strategy. This was to get an appeal done later. He won't appeal. I can guarantee you now, I will bet my bollocks to a barn dance. Forgot my glasses. It's better. Bet my bollocks to a barn dance. There won't be an appeal because an appeal doesn't make sense. An appeal don't make sense there. An appeal doesn't mean that he all of a sudden is not charged with this crime or everything disappears. It just means that if he appeals and the appeal gets accepted, he gets removed from the equation and then he gets placed back to where he was. It's like you run a race, you decide that you don't want to run it, then you decide you want to continue running it, so you get put back where you were. But you lose a lot of strength that you initially had because you've fucking admitted to it. And generally, appeals don't really go well. So tell me I'm wrong. Let me know down below what you think. I feel at this stage that you've got at least two people in this that were manipulated, that were used, and they were forced into a specific type of deal. And maybe Dylan Mortensen being allowed to or doing her GoFundMe is reparation, is some degree of, you know, she's been put in this position and manipulated and been made to look a certain way in the public. So her family have said, well, you'll fucking earn from it then. They've fucked your life up. They've fucked your reputation up. So you deserve something out of it. Bethany Funk, on the other hand, probably there was nothing that they could manipulate her with because she perhaps weren't even fucking there. She didn't see nothing. She didn't hear nothing. All she had to go on was what she was told by the other person, Dylan Mortensen. Bethany Funk didn't even bother going back to stand by her side when they went into the sentencing hearing, which is telling in itself. But Bryan Kohberger and Dylan Mortensen, in my opinion, and it's a non-professional opinion, and on the grander scheme of things, had no fucking bearing on anything whatsoever. I feel that they were both used. I think that they were used to cover up what really happened here. And in video 2 later on, no, not video 2, because I'm only doing 1. Tomorrow then, we'll talk about why this could possibly be the case. It's something that we've touched on previously, but I think it makes sense. So join me tomorrow when we talk about that. Love you all. Enjoy the rest of your Thirsty Thursday. Amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. Mwah.